The salvage beacon pulsed red against the star-drunk void, its ancient signal cutting through the cosmic silence like a blade through velvet. Captain Chance Vane pressed closer to the viewport of his ship, watching the derelict vessel spin lazily in the gravitational embrace of a dying star. The hull bore markings he'd never seen before. Not human, not any of the known alien confederations, something else entirely. The proximity alarms screamed their warnings, but Chance had learned to trust his instincts over ship protocols. His fingers danced across the navigation controls, bringing his salvage craft closer to the mysterious derelict. The ship's hull gleamed with an otherworldly luminescence, as if starlight itself had been woven into the metal. Behind him, the airlock cycled with a sound like breaking glass. Chance didn't turn around. He'd been expecting company ever since he'd started following the celestial artifact trail 3 months ago. The items he'd been collecting weren't random salvage. They were pieces of something larger, something that hummed with power that made his teeth ache and his dreams fill with wings and fire. The woman who stepped through his airlock moved with liquid grace, her form encased in armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her face was stunning in that terrible way that made mortals forget their own names. But her eyes held depths that spoke of eons and pain beyond human comprehension. She smiled, and Chance felt his blood turn to ice water. "You've been collecting my property, Captain Vane." Her voice carried harmonics that vibrated through his bones, as if she spoke in frequencies that existed beyond normal sound. Chance kept his hands steady on the controls, though every instinct screamed at him to reach for the plasma rifle maglocked to his thigh. "Lady, I don't know what you're talking about. I salvage what I find, nothing more." She took another step forward, and the temperature in the cabin dropped 10 degrees. Frost began forming on the metal surfaces, crystalline patterns that looked almost like writing in some forgotten language. "The fragments you've been collecting," she said, her armor's surface rippling like liquid shadow. "They belonged to something sacred, something that was stolen from the celestial vaults before the first stars cooled." Chance finally turned to face her, keeping his expression carefully neutral. Up close, she was even more dangerous than he'd imagined. Her armor moved like it was alive, constantly shifting between solid matter and something that looked like concentrated starlight. But it was her eyes that gave her away. They held too much pain, too much loss for someone who was supposed to be hunting him. "Sacred, huh? Then why are you wearing demon armor?" For just a moment, her perfect composure cracked. The mask slipped, and he saw something raw and desperate beneath the otherworldly beauty. She recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. "I am Lux'ara," she said, her voice carrying the weight of formal titles and ancient authority. "I am the enforcer of celestial law, and you have stolen artifacts that could tear apart the fabric of reality itself." Chance nodded slowly, but his mind was racing. The name meant light in the old tongues, but she was wreathed in shadow. The armor was definitely infernal in origin, but she spoke like she had celestial authority. None of it added up. "Show me," he said simply. "What? The artifacts? You say they're dangerous. Show me why." Her eyes narrowed, but she extended her hand. The air around her fingers began to shimmer, and suddenly a fragment materialized in her palm. It was beautiful and terrible, a piece of crystallized starlight that pulsed with inner fire. The moment it appeared, every other artifact in Chance's hidden collection began to resonate, their combined harmonics creating a song that made the bulkheads groan. Chance's breath caught in his throat. The song was hauntingly beautiful, but beneath it he could hear something else. Screaming. The sound of worlds ending and being reborn. "That's not possible," he whispered. "The fragments you've collected," Lux'ara said, and her voice was suddenly tired beyond measure, "are pieces of the redemption engine, a weapon created by the first ones to offer a choice to those who had fallen beyond hope. It can either restore a soul to its original grace or damn it to absolute darkness. She closed her fist, and the fragment vanished. The silence that followed was deafening. "And you're here because," he said, understanding beginning to dawn. "Because I need to know what I am," she finished. "The celestial courts cast me out, but the infernal realms won't accept me. I exist between light and shadow, belonging to neither. The engine is the only thing that can give me an answer." Chance studied her face, seeing the truth written in every line of desperate hope. She wasn't hunting him. She was hunting salvation. "The problem is," she continued, her voice hardening again, "I'm not the only one who knows what you've been collecting. The celestial bounty hunters think you're working for the infernal courts. The demon lords think you're a tool of heaven, and both sides want you dead." As if summoned by her words, the ship's proximity alarms began screaming again. 3 vessels had just dropped out of hyperspace, their configurations unlike anything in the known registries. One blazed with pure white light that hurt to look at directly. Another was a writhing mass of darkness that seemed to devour the stars around it. The third was something in between, its hull shimmering with patterns that shifted constantly between angelic script and demonic runes. Chance's hands flew over the controls, bringing his ship's weapons online. The derelict vessel beside them suddenly didn't seem like such safe salvage anymore. "Well," he said, his voice steady despite the odds stacked against them, "looks like we're about to get some unwanted company." Lux'ara moved to the weapons console, her fingers dancing over controls she shouldn't have known how to operate. The ship's defense systems responded to her touch like they'd been waiting for her all along. "They've been tracking the engine fragments for millennia," she said. "The pieces want to be reunited. They call to each other across the void, and we've brought them close enough to sing in harmony." The first attacker, the blazing white vessel, fired a beam of pure celestial energy that would have vaporized a normal ship. Chance threw them into a spiraling dive, using the derelict's mass to shield them from the blast. The beam struck the ancient hull and was absorbed, the mysterious metal drinking in the energy like a sponge. "Your turn," he said to Lux'ara. Her response was immediate. Dark energy lanced out from their weapons, meeting the next celestial attack head-on. The collision created a shockwave that sent all 3 attacking vessels spinning away from each other. The demonic ship recovered first, its hull rippling as it prepared to fire. But instead of weapons, it launched something else. Boarding pods, dozens of them, each one pulsing with infernal energy. "They're not trying to destroy us," Lux'ara said, her voice tight with realization. "They're trying to take us alive." The third vessel, the one caught between light and shadow, began broadcasting on all frequencies. The voice that emerged from the speakers was neither male nor female, neither human nor alien. It was something that existed in the spaces between definitions. "Return what you have stolen," it said, "and your deaths will be swift." Chance looked at Lux'ara, seeing his own grim determination reflected in her eyes. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and caught between forces that treated mortal concerns as less than dust. But they had something their enemies didn't. They had each other. "Ready for a fight?" he asked. She smiled, and for the first time since she'd appeared, the expression reached her eyes. Her armor shifted, becoming something that looked more like starlight than shadow. The transformation was beautiful and terrible, power made manifest in a form that sang with both redemption and damnation. "Captain Vane," she said, her voice carrying new harmonics that made the air itself tremble with possibility, "I've been ready for this fight since the first star fell from grace." The boarding pods struck their hull with sounds like thunder. Emergency lights bathed the corridor in red as the ship's automated systems began cycling the airlock. Whatever was coming through those pods, it wasn't going to be interested in negotiation. Chance drew his plasma rifle, the weapon's power cell humming with lethal energy. Beside him, Lux'ara raised her hands, and the air around her fingers began to crackle with forces that existed beyond the normal spectrum of reality. The airlock finished cycling. The door slid open with a hydraulic hiss. What emerged wasn't quite demon and wasn't quite angel. It was something caught between states, just like Lux'ara herself. Multiple entities, each one a contradiction of light and shadow, stepped through the threshold with weapons that looked like they'd been forged from crystallized screams. The first one spoke in a voice like breaking glass. "We offer terms." Chance's response was immediate. He fired, the plasma bolt taking the creature's center mass. It staggered but didn't fall, its form rippling like water as it absorbed the energy. "I'm not much for talking," he said, cycling another round into the chamber. The creature's response was to raise its weapon, but Lux'ara was faster. Her hands moved in patterns that left trails of light and shadow in the air, and suddenly the boarding party was frozen in place, caught between competing forces that held them motionless. "The engine fragments," she said, her voice strained with effort, "are calling to each other. They want to be whole again. But if they're reunited here, in this place, the resonance will tear a hole in reality itself." Chance looked at the derelict ship through the viewport, understanding finally dawning. The vessel wasn't just ancient. It was a piece of the engine itself, the core around which all the fragments orbited, and they'd brought the missing pieces directly to it. The ship around them began to vibrate, a low harmonic that built in intensity until the bulkheads themselves began to sing. The frozen attackers flickered, their forms becoming translucent as the competing energies of creation and destruction battled for supremacy. "We need to get out of here," Chance said, but even as he spoke, he knew it was too late. The derelict ship was coming alive, its hull blazing with light that held every color and none. The engine was awakening, and with it, the choice that had been built into its very nature. Redemption or damnation, light or darkness, the decision that would determine not just their fate, but the fate of everything the engine touched. Lux'ara looked at him, her eyes holding depths that spoke of hope and terror in equal measure. In her face, he saw the reflection of his own choice. They could try to run, try to escape the consequences of what they'd set in motion. Or they could face it together, whatever the outcome. "The choice," she said, her voice barely audible over the growing harmonic, "has always been ours to make." Chance reached for her hand, his fingers interlocking with hers. The moment their skin touched, the engine's song changed, becoming something that was neither purely celestial nor purely infernal. It was something new, something that existed in the space between absolutes. Together, they stepped forward into the light that was both salvation and damnation, ready to face whatever choice the engine would demand of them. The stars watched, and the universe held its breath, waiting to see what would emerge from the collision of light and shadow, redemption and fall, pirate and angel caught between heaven and hell. The redemption engine sang its ancient song, and in that moment, all possibilities became real.